In the brutal, unforgiving arena of combat sports, victory demands more than just strength and skill. It requires discipline. It requires respect. And above all, it demands humility. Yet time and again, fighters step into the ring, not with reverence for the sport or for their opponents, but with cockiness, arrogance, and an insatiable thirst for attention. These are the fighters who underestimate the code of honor that martial arts were built upon. Fighters who choose taunts over tactics and flash over form. They preen for cameras, belittle their adversaries, and perform for the crowd as though the outcome has already been written. But what happens when these self-anointed stars meet a reckoning they never saw coming? This is the tale of those who chose bravado over balance and found themselves punished not only physically, but publicly, humiliated in the very arena they thought they owned. These aren't just fights, they're morality plays, and every punch tells a story. Take Taylor Starling, for example. Known in some corners of the fight world as Cabe, Taylor's allure extended far beyond her physical prowess. With her golden locks and unrelenting swagger, she walked the line between charm and provocation, but behind the beauty was a fighter unafraid to employ theatrics, someone who leaned more into spectacle than sportsmanship. When she faced off against the fearsome Christina Feria, tensions were already boiling. The stare-down between them was less a weigh-in and more a declaration of war. Starling's smug expressions and flippant handshakes served only to fuel the fire inside Feria, who vowed not just to beat her, but to dismantle her publicly, and dismantle her she did. The moment the bell rang, Feria channeled every ounce of frustration and fury into her fists. She pounded Starling with precision, tearing through her facade like a storm through glass. The smirk disappeared. The taunts dried up. And what remained was a young woman trembling under the weight of her opponent's fury. Her corner begged her to fight on, but Starling knew she couldn't. The fighter, who once strutted across the stage like she owned it, was now sobbing, broken, and defeated. Her verbal surrender wasn't just an admission of loss, it was a plea for mercy. And in that moment, Cabe was humbled, not just as a fighter, but as a person. But if Starling's collapse was dramatic, Camila Zusi Smogula's downfall was downright operatic. Known for mocking her opponents before they'd even touched gloves, Zusi's ego preceded her. Before her match against the diminutive but determined Camila Vibronic, she openly ridiculed her opponent's height, treating her with derision and scorn. She didn't just underestimate Vibronics, she demeaned her. It was textbook arrogance. Initially, Zusi's strength gave her the upper hand, but pride is a dangerous blindfold. Vibronic, fueled by rage and driven by dignity, found her rhythm. A takedown flipped the script. Hammer fists followed. The crowd watched as the very fighter Zusi had dismissed turned into a force of vengeance. With the technique of a trained killer and the fury of the wronged, Vibronic choked Zusi into submission. Then, just for good measure, she mimicked the same taunting gesture Zusi had used against her. It wasn't just a win, it was poetic justice. Not all villains in this story were women. In perhaps the most controversial chapter of modern MMA, a fighter named Boyd Burton, now competing as Fallon Fox after transitioning, entered the women's division. Fox was bigger, stronger, more experienced, and with every victory, the debate about fairness intensified. His opponents didn't just face a fighter, they faced the physical consequences of an unbalanced battlefield. Ashley Evans Smith was next in line. Too many, she was a lamb led to slaughter. But Ashley had other plans. Despite being tossed around in the early rounds, she held firm, weathering the storm. Then, like a twist in a script, she flipped the fight on its head. Clinching, positioning, striking, Ashley began to carve her path. In the third round, she mounted her comeback with surgical brutality. Fox, the fighter who many believed could never be touched, crumbled. The crowd roared. Ashley hadn't just won a fight, she'd restored balance, and in doing so, she had dismantled the myth of invincibility. Elsewhere, Drina Kotova entered the ring with all the subtlety of a cartoon villain, taunting her opponent Regina Labova with gestures and arrogance. She treated the match like a runway show. Instead of a professional competition, she posed, she mocked, she turned wins into comedy sketches. She flaunted her physique like it was the weapon that would end the fight before it began. But when the bell rang, fate had other plans. In an almost surreal moment, Katavahu had dominated the theatrics, charged forward, and, in a clumsy flurry of miscalculated aggression, managed to knock herself out. Regina, stunned, had barely lifted a glove. Victory had been handed to her by the sheer incompetence of her opponent. Kotova lay sprawled on the mat, not as a champion, but as a warning. When arrogance overshadows preparation, disaster is just a misstep away. Then came the wrath of a different Jessica Fresh, in a blatant act of disrespect during her bout with Cynthia Bleeber. Fresh struck her opponent after the bell had rung, a cowardly move that left the crowd in shock. The violation was as blatant as it was dishonorable. The MMA world took notice, and one fighter, Lindsay Wonderwoman Williams, decided to become judge, jury, and executioner. In their face-off, Fresh attempted the same cheap trick submission attempts, ground strikes, intimidation, but Wonder Woman had the grit of a veteran and the flexibility of a gymnast. She absorbed the worst Fresh had to offer, then turned the tide with a mousetrap submission that squeezed the last breath of arrogance out of her rival. This wasn't just a win, it was an exorcism. But even among all these tales of downfall and justice, few were as brutal as the saga of Sheila Gaff, known for attacking during glove touches and taking cheap shots at vulnerable moments. Gaff made a name for herself through deception. Against Jennifer Maya, she launched a sucker punch that many still call one of the dirtiest moves in MMA history. But karma is patient, and sometimes, it wears the face of another Brazilian fighter, like Ariane Lipski, the queen of violence. Lipski didn't bother with the formalities. She walked into the ring like an executioner with a sentence to carry out. Gaff tried her old tricks, but this time, they failed. The queen rained down blows with relentless precision, grounding Gaff, and pounding out every ounce of deceit from her bones. It wasn't just punishment, it was a purge. And then there was Paige VanZant, the glamour queen of combat sports. With her looks, her following, and her OnlyFans presence, Paige blurred the line between athlete and influencer. But when she fought Britain Hart, all the branding in the world couldn't save her. VanZant initiated the pre-fight disrespect with a sneaky neck grab and eye rolls, playing the villain behind a dazzling smile. But when the cage closed, Hart brought the pain. Round after round, Hart picked her apart. At one point, VanZant resorted to illegal shots punches to the back of the head, but nothing she did could stop the punishment. Hart's punches shattered the illusion. Paige, once adored for her image, now bled humiliation into the mat. The pretty face had met the ugly truth of the fight game. Finally, perhaps the most grotesque display of arrogance came from Sofia Ganova. Before her fight with Siana Shikofa, she not only insulted her opponent, she literally threw dog food at her. A move so disgusting it blurred the line between fight promotion and public humiliation. But while Ganova played queen, Shikova trained like a warrior. When the bell rang, Siana extended her hand in good faith. Ganova, true to her character, swatted it away. It was a slap to sportsmanship, but soon, it would be returned tenfold. Shikova unleashed a barrage of calculated strikes, a flurry of rage and retribution. Her foot smashed into Ganova's face. Her fist sculpted a lesson in humility. When it was over, Ganova was crying not from pain, but from the realization that her arrogance had turned into public disgrace. In fight after fight, a pattern emerges. Those who mock are humbled. Those who cheat are punished. Those who taunt are taught painful lessons in respect. The ring may be small, but it holds the weight of a lifetime's worth of morality. No amount of bravado can save a fighter from the consequences of underestimating their opponent. In the end, true strength lies not just in fists or fame, but in character. ***, which of these stories shocked you the most? Do you believe arrogance is a necessary tool in a fighter's arsenal or a sure path to downfall? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of drama, justice, and redemption,